Hey guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This evening I'm going to be doing another movie review. This movie is a horror comedy from the USA, English language, released in the year 2010, directed by Bradley Scott Sullivan, and this film is called I Didn't Come Here to Die. So I Didn't Come Here to Die takes place with some young volunteer adults who are tasked with making a clearance in this remote wilderness in order for construction of a summer camp for children in the future. So they're all here for reasons of self-improvement. They've had problems in their past life that have caused them to actually come here. And so the woman who's running this group says that if they actually pull together, they can actually make themselves feel better. And so there are a few rules to this group, is that they can't be stupid, they can't have alcohol, because they're going to be operating with some pretty dangerous equipment such as chainsaws to actually cut down the trees and bushes. And so they appear to be abiding by these rules, but they actually find out one evening that one of them has smuggled some alcohol. So they're going to have a little bit of fun tonight while the leader is away, and they're going to drink. And unfortunately, the heavy drinking results in an accident that occurs that forces this person to go to the nearest town for some medical treatment. So the woman who runs this group actually accompanies her to this town, but while they're away, this series of unfortunate accidents starts to occur where a lot of bad luck is thrust upon the group that results in some deaths. And so nothing is as it seems, and as the group is trying to come to terms with what's going on, when they try and rectify the issue, they just intensify that bad luck, and as more people end up dying, it soon becomes apparent that this has turned from a project of self-improvement to a project of survival. And so whether or not they can outlast their bad luck is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now my thoughts on I Didn't Come Here to Die. For the longest time, I chose to overlook this film for the simple fact that it's a low-budget horror movie. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not a snob. I just don't overlook low-budget movies for the sake of it. But when it's very pricey, as far as DVD and Blu-ray is concerned, I just don't think it's worth the risk. Is that it's like playing Russian roulette. 1 in every 6 movies is very good, but it's putting up with the other 5 bad movies that makes it very frustrating. And so I wasn't prepared to fork out that much money for a movie that could be really bad. Is that the trailer looked alright, but that low-budget quality actually made me feel as though maybe this is a director who doesn't know his limitations. Is that this is the problem with low budget, is that they don't know their limitations, they try something extravagant, and then all the shortcomings become very obvious. And so it does get in the way of being entertained. But then lately, in the last few weeks, I saw it very cheap on Blu-ray for $6 in a second-hand store, so I thought this is the perfect opportunity to actually see if my curiosity is, it actually pays off. And so after seeing the film, I will say that I was actually quite surprised by how much I enjoyed this experience. That it's not a perfect film, but I think the movie's imperfections make it a very charming movie that actually is a throwback to the films of the 70s. In the films of the 70s, it wasn't about making horror films that are going to be Oscar-worthy. It was about making horror films that are very, very enjoyable and very self-aware. You know, case in point, The Evil Dead. The Evil Dead was a very silly film, but it's a classic because you can sit back and really enjoy yourself. It wasn't trying something of, you know, it didn't have twists and turns. It was just a simple movie about survival in a cabin, and that's what made it the movie that it is. And so you've got this movie, I Didn't Come Here to Die, that actually pays respect to the films of the 70s, because it's got a very grainy production that I thought was very quirky, but once again, it actually hides the low budget. And so this is a director who was very smart with what he was doing, who knew exactly what he had to play with, and also being a very self-aware film, is that it wants to be entertaining as opposed to being a complex brain teaser. And that's the reason why I enjoyed it as much as I did, because the story is very simplistic, and the story isn't the traditional sense of good guy versus bad guy. This is a movie, a lower budget version of Tucker and Dale vs. Evil, where it's all about the villain being bad luck, and that these good people are being put into a situation where when they try to rectify the situation, it just gets worse and worse. And this is what brings out the black comedy. There are scenes in this film where you'll be laughing at things that in reality you'd be absolutely mortified with. And this is everything that is black comedy, is that if it can make you laugh at things that are hideous, then all of a sudden you feel guilty for laughing, but you can't help but keep laughing. And this is exactly the feeling you get with black-hearted films, is that, as I said, you're laughing at someone being decapitated. In reality, that's absolutely absurd. Only a psychopath would do that. So it's bringing out a different side in the viewer, and it's the viewer actually looking at themselves for laughing at this. And when a black comedy is actually done properly, I believe that it's a very unique experience. And I think that in patches, this movie really nailed what it is to be black comedy. There's also a very random scene at the end that I absolutely loved, involving a police officer, that I thought was just so out of place that I couldn't help but laugh. And that's basically what sums up this film, is that, as I said, a very charming film, and the imperfections that it has actually works into its favour. And so this is definitely a movie of a no-brainer, basically, that you can enjoy with a group of friends with some beer and popcorn, that you can leave your brain at the door and just enjoy what's going on. It has some absolutely phenomenal gore effects, and once again, it is aware of what it's capable of, because it's not frequent gore. So after after a while it starts to go down very cheap CGI. It's all very practical, and because it's used very sparingly, it can actually intensify that gore. It can actually have a lot more concentration on actually making something that's very shocking. There's one scene involving a chainsaw that I thought was absolutely fantastic, and as I said, it actually shocks you, but at the same time has that elevation of lightheartedness that a black comedy should have. And it only goes for 80 minutes, so I thought the runtime was fantastic, and the script was surprisingly competent. Is that, as I said, the scene at the end involving the policeman, it was so funny because it was really well written, and so there are other parts of the film that actually made me laugh because of the script. And so production level, as far as low budget entertainment is concerned, don't let that push you off, because it is actually of a much higher standard than you would actually initially think. The only problem I have with the film is that it really wasn't as funny as I really wanted it to be on a consistent level. Yes, in patches it was very funny, but overall I just felt as though there were too many patches where it really wasn't that funny. Is that it was trying to be, it wasn't trying too hard, but I thought as though it was actually just having glimpses of trying to be funny, and it's not really coming out of its shell. Is that, okay, I laughed here, I laughed there, and I laughed here, but I wanted to laugh a little bit more. And so as far as a horror comedy is concerned, I don't think it really nailed the comedy on a consistent level, but there was enough chuckles in there to really warrant it as a lighthearted film, but I just don't think it really crossed the line to go into an all-out horror comedy. And the horror aspect, as I said, it's like Tucker and Dale versus Evil. It's not a monster, it's not a psychopath, it's basically about bad luck. So it's a different kind of horror movie, and on some instances it's a good thing because it's trying something different, but if you're not a fan of different style of movies, then maybe that's not going to really appeal to you as far as horror is concerned. But for a low-budget movie, this could have been a lot worse than it actually was. I actually believe that this is very entertaining. As I said, it's definitely the prime candidate for a group of friends around with some popcorn. And I'm sure that if you're like me, you're expecting a movie that is of a much lesser quality than you actually get. So overall, for I Didn't Come Here to Die, I'm going to give this one 3 stars. Very enjoyable stuff. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later. Bye.